Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank everyone for coming in on a Sunday, and this is a very important and as you'll see, I think, a very positive update on an issue that has been with us for a long time. So I'm going to share a couple of thoughts, and then we're going to let some of the experts who are here with us speak to some of the issues in detail, and then, of course, we're here to take your questions. But I want to start out by reflecting on the fact that I was trying to figure out if it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago.
December 2016, 2 years ago.
2 years ago, that's what I thought. So 2 years ago, almost to the day, we came out and we decided to sort of lay bare and put all transparency into the status of the rape kit backlog in New Mexico across all jurisdictions and across all crime labs. And of course, we had some good news, which of course we've been working with the state on Friday about the progress they've made on their chunk of the backlog. Today we're here to provide an update on the largest backlog, of course, in New Mexico, which is at our Albuquerque crime lab. And we have some very, very positive progress to report, but of course, there's still a long ways to go. Now, in public service as an elected official, I get to tackle many issues, and this one in particular is close to my heart. As I mentioned, it's something now that spans 3 elected offices. I started on this issue when I was a state senator. And then, of course, as auditor, I think we were able to make a huge difference in terms of conducting the first ever statewide audit of the sexual assault evidence kits, commonly known as rape kits. We worked with law enforcement agencies and advocates around the state to find out how many exactly untested rape kits were in New Mexico and why. Now, when we started working on this, one of the first things that I learned is that many of these rape kits are from children. And unfortunately, also many of them are, as we know, going back all the way to the 1980s. These are issues that are deeply seated in our community, unfortunately, and they're issues that touch in a lot of areas of our life, whether it's our family, whether it's our community, whether it's the fundamental notion of safety. But there are also issues that we have to address head on. And the most salient part of that issue has been the lack of closure, the lack of justice, the lack of anything with respect to an untested kit sitting on a shelf. And so for me, one of the biggest reasons, one of the huge reasons why I actually ran for mayor was because I was tired of waiting for these kits to get tested. As auditor, we identified how many there were, and then it takes really the executive branch, whether it's at the state level or at the city level, to actually move that ball forward and get these kits tested. And so for me, this is also, I think, for the wrong reasons, but for the right outcome. This is why, in fact, Sarita and I wanted this position. And I'm sure this has been one of the most impactful projects that we've worked on over the course of our public service. Now, many people helped us start shining a light on the backlog when we got this started, and they're here in the room with us now, and we're going to hear from them. I do want to introduce, of course, our Chief Administrative Officer, Sarita Nair, who I think everyone knows, our Chief of Staff, Justine Freeman, who is over there. Folks might recall she's been working on this issue since back at the auditor's office, and she was with me at the state legislature as well. And so for a lot of us, this has been something that we've been working on for a long time, but even longer than that are the advocates, the SANE Collaborative, and the new director who's, tell me your name again. Suzanne, who just started, and of course, we have Connie Monahan, who we have done so much with. Who's hiding back there as well. So, and many others too. We also have our Deputy Chief Art Gonzalez, Commander Chris George, who oversees the Scientific Evidence Lab, and Sergeant Amanda Wild from the Sex Crimes Unit, and also our Crime Lab Director, Jay Stewart, who's actually been with us through a couple of iterations on this too. Now, our work as auditors shaped our commitment to what I wanted to do as mayor with respect to dealing with this backlog. And clearing the rape kit backlog is also about honoring the promise to survivors, in many cases a promise that was made decades ago that we are finally now honoring. So in terms of where we're at today, I want to do a couple of things. One, share a little bit of awareness on some programs that are ongoing. But of course, I think it's also important so folks realize this is the sexual assault evidence kit sort of packet. This is where the material goes in, whether it's hair samples, DNA, etc. But we also like to display this because in many cases, it's actually a huge box of evidence. And so this is fundamentally what's known as a rape kit, but the kit, it really is a amalgamation of all the evidence that's taken with relation to any kind of sexual assault. Now, there are two main paths that rape kits get tested in New Mexico. Of course, there's the Santa Fe Crime Lab, which is our state crime lab, and they basically handle everything outside the Bernalillo County area. And then we have the Albuquerque Crime Lab, which handles everything here historically as well from Bernalillo County, although for efficiency, Bernalillo County's been sending some of theirs to the state as well more recently. Now, our audit back in 2016 found that we had kits dating back to 1981, and at that time there were 5,552 untested kits. From that point on, this was truly a tale of two backlogs. We had across the state police departments and sheriff's offices and departments of public safety, including Secretary Weaver, stepping up in the right way. The minute our audit came out, we actually started seeing behavior change in departments all across our state with respect to how they handle evidence. Now, unfortunately, when we got into office in Albuquerque, only 170 of Albuquerque's backlog kits had been tested since that audit. So back in January 1, I signed an executive order requiring APD and the ASSERT team, which stands for Albuquerque Sexual Assault Evidence Response Team, to develop a comprehensive plan to process the backlog right here in Albuquerque, including funding streams to make that backlog actually start to disappear. This team worked together with advocates to develop a comprehensive plan, and they deserve a lot of credit for the work they've put in each and every day to get the results we're going to announce today. So I want to share with you that we committed to ending this backlog in our first term in office, and we are on target to do that. And as of today, we roughly have gotten half the backlog tested. So we have tested 2,874 kits we have been submitted for testing. There are still 2,678 kits that remain in the backlog, but we're on track to completely clear that backlog by the end of 2020. So there's still a long road ahead, but we are very encouraged by the progress. Now, make no mistake that ending this backlog is a public safety issue. Whether it's honoring that promise for victims or it's actually getting justice and trying to get those perpetrators off the streets, even if they don't live in our community or even if the assault was committed in another community and now they're here. That's the point of uploading these the DNA evidence to the CODIS database, so we can actually fight sexual assault together across the country and across all jurisdictions. Now, other cities like Cleveland and Detroit have tackled their own backlogs and have experienced this firsthand. And when rape kits have adequate material to identify the DNA sequencing or the DNA footprint or fingerprint, it goes into this national database, and that's how we can actually try and track offenders and also try and stop the worst kinds of offenders from doing it again. Now, there's another term that we use in this world called the hit rate, and the hit rate is basically the number of kits that had a match to a known or unknown profile in the national DNA database, in the CODIS database. And of those kits that have been tested in Albuquerque, so far we have a hit rate of 20%. That is compared to a national average of 11.8%. And so for us, this is extremely meaningful because we're doubling the chances of actually providing some form of justice at the end of the day compared to where the rest of the country's at. Now, testing these kits, of course, is just one part of the issue. And in many ways, it might be the most direct to solve. There are all sorts of other pieces that go towards actually taking sexual assault seriously in our community, to believing women and children when they tell their story. It also means making sure that the survivors have the resources they need at each step of the way. And it means continuing to bring transparency to this issue. So we want to make it easier for survivors to find out information, and our partners at SANE have dedicated have a dedicated number and a dedicated email so you can check in on the status of your particular kit. So we want to encourage anyone who has submitted a kit to call 1-866-SAIL or email. The number is kitinfo@abqsane.org. And we also have these brochures which are available at the Family Advocacy Center and I believe probably our different command centers around the city. And so this is very, very important because now we believe we can actually get those kits tested. And so we want to have cooperation with folks, if they so choose, to help us also connect the testing of those kits to possible justice. Now, we also want to continue to bring transparency to this issue, and so we're continuously updating a website where you can check on the latest news with respect to the backlog. That's at cabq.gov/endthebacklog. Now, while we're making progress on this, we still have a long road ahead. We are committed to getting everything we can do in the city of Albuquerque on this issue and to try and make this city as safe as we can for everyone. Now, I also did just learn this morning the next step in this has to do a lot with prosecution and victim notification. We have worked out our funding and such that we now have 2 more positions for detectives in our sex crime unit. And so those 2 positions, making those available as of today, are going to go a long way to helping us address the next steps in this process. Now, to share a little bit more about this, I want to introduce our CAO, Sarita Nair, and I want to share with you, there are issues that take all sorts of people in all sorts of ways to help. And I think everyone around this room has obviously done their part to help. And I know we believed ever since we started this project in the state auditor's office, we wanted to do everything we can given the hat we're sort of wearing to address this issue. But at the end of the day, it's clear at the city of Albuquerque, what was lacking fundamentally, frankly, was just leadership and prioritization on this issue. And so obviously I'm a believer in this issue, but in many ways it's because of what I've learned from everyone around me and also what I've learned from our CAO, Sarita Nair. And she is the one who has been driving this process day in and day out, week after week, and making sure that we actually end the backlog, that we don't just talk about it, that we don't just do press conferences on it, that we are actually delivering the kind of justice and restoring that promise that was made decades ago. She is the one who has been doing that. So I want to introduce her and let her share a few words. Our CAO, Sarita Nair.
Thank you, Mayor. So they asked me to start with a little bit about what it means for me personally to be in a position to actually clear the backlog after talking about it for so long. And I think it means a couple of things. First is that over that year that we spent touring the state and talking about the backlog, I met so many survivors of sexual assault who either had submitted a kit and never heard about it, or who had found justice because of their kit, or who had never even reported their crime because of what they had heard about what victims go through in the process of prosecution. So the main thing that being in a position to do this work has meant to me is that I get to honor those stories and those survivors. But it also has been a great lesson in how putting the right people in the right places to make change can really make all the difference. And one of the first things we did when we changed leadership at the Albuquerque Police Department was to change the command staff from all the way to Deputy Chief Art Gonzalez, who's now sort of the Deputy Chief over that area, and including the commander over the Scientific Evidence Laboratory. So I'm really grateful to everybody who's in that chain of command who has made this a reality. So as the mayor said, while we're making progress, there's still a long road ahead. We must finish the job, and we're on track to do that by the end of 2020. We also need to make sure that we have the resources and systems in place so that another backlog never develops. That requires the department and the crime lab to make some important changes, and they're continuously finding ways to improve. We have some of the people in this room who are personally dedicated to helping the department learn and adapt so this never happens again. And specifically, I'm talking about the advocates who have been behind us, pushing us, making us aware, holding our feet to the fire on this issue for years now. APD added 3 detectives to the sex crimes unit, and then in addition, we have the 2 slots that the mayor just spoke about, and there are also 2 detectives working on cold cases. The sex crimes unit was also awarded a grant to hire civilian staff to support backlog reduction, including a project coordinator and 2 victim liaisons. As we were touring the state, one of the things that we heard from concerned citizens a lot of times is, what can I do to help? Can I raise money? Can I have a house party? Can I get together my friends and come up with a couple $100s to test the kits? And that was amazing, and it just shows the generosity of spirit. But I always was clear to say that we don't want to take the bake sale approach to testing the backlog just because this is an issue that affects primarily women and children. It is important to devote real public resources because this is a real public safety issue for everyone in our community. And so as we have gotten additional funding from the City Council through federal grants, we are also going to be going to the state and asking for additional resources there as well. APD recently hired a sexual assault kit initiative advocate and a sex crimes advocate to work on better supporting victims, and that has to do with the victim notification protocol. And the mayor directed APD to change the policy relating to the destruction of kits for unsolved cases so that we make sure that, especially in the case of minors, those kits are being preserved as long as they need to be, given how those cases tend to evolve. Now, we've also spoke continuously about how the rape kit backlog is a reflection of a deeper problem in our society, and that is needing to take sexual assault seriously as a crime and to support survivors. APD is actively engaged with the ACERT team, co-leading it. Together, the members of the team developed a victim notification plan, including victim notification teams that use trauma-informed best practices and address other victim issues, such as providing survivors with a comprehensive set of resources. While we're encouraged, there are a lot of steps between a kit being tested and putting someone behind bars. It is essential for survivors to have resources and information during that time. We're going to continue to prioritize resources to these efforts. We're going to continue to seek grants and will request more help from the legislature in January. Specifically, we are seeking $650,000 to contract with DNA robotics vendors, which would reduce processing times while freeing up scientists to perform other important tasks, as well as replacing aging scientific equipment. Because Albuquerque is literally the crossroads for so many criminals and criminal syndicates in our state, we do believe that these funds and this work is a statewide priority. So now I'd like to introduce Teresa De Anza, Director of the Albuquerque SANE Collaborative and Chair of the ACERT team.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Mayor Keller, Sarita, thanks to both of these individuals for their leadership in making sure that the issue related to the backlog of untested kits in Albuquerque constantly stays on the forefront and that we're paying attention to it. I also want to just remind folks that at Albuquerque SANE, we're available 24 hours a day to provide medical and forensic services to survivors. We're actually the agency that collects the kits in the first place. But our work in getting this done is dependent on collaboration. And the ACERT is a multidisciplinary, multi-agency group of about 25 individuals who sit together at the table and really track the progress of the backlog. We are made up of representatives from a large number of agencies. This includes the mayor's office as well as APD, the sex crimes unit particularly, and the crime lab. We have the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office joining us. The District Attorney's Office sits at this table with us. We have community partners such as Albuquerque SANE and the Rape Crisis Center. We're working with the Native American Coalition, or the Coalition of to Stop Violence Against Native American. We have the New Mexico Coalition to Stop Violence, all my acronyms, New Mexico Coalition of Sexual Assault Programs. We have survivors that have assisted us in this work. So we are indeed multi-agency and multidisciplinary. We've been meeting monthly since May of 2017, although the resolution that formed the ACERT indicated we would meet quarterly. This has been a really important topic to us, and we have met monthly since we were formed in May of 2017. And I co-chair the committee with Deputy Chief Arturo Gonzalez. It's been my privilege and my honor to co-chair this work for the past 20 months. And we've accomplished a lot. As the mayor's indicated, the executive order asked us to prepare an ACERT plan, which I brought a copy of. It's also posted on the City of Albuquerque's website. We have a whole section devoted to the backlog. We've developed a victim notification protocol, which Sarita has spoken about. This is a model policy that's going to probably be adopted statewide. And so it really gives detailed steps and recommendations for how we reach out to survivors of sexual violence and how we do it in a way that doesn't re-traumatize. And so we're really proud of that work. The Crime Lab, beginning in October, has met the City Council resolution to get kits tested within 90 days of Albuquerque SANE collecting them and law enforcement picking them up. So the team is dedicated to making sure that we are supporting survivors. This is probably our most important objective, is to make sure that the work that we do is driven by how do we best serve those individuals who for 5, 10, 15, 30, close to 40 years perhaps, have had a kid in the backlog. We're also committed to making sure that we change the system in Albuquerque and Bernalillo County so that when someone experiences an event that shatters their lives, as rape does, that at every step in their recovery they encounter systems and people who are prepared to professionally and compassionately provide them assistance. The residents of this city and of this county deserve a safer place to live, and holding sexual assault offenders responsible for their actions helps to ensure a safer place for all of us to live. So thank you to all of our community partners, the advocates, law enforcement, who sit at the table, but who also just live in our communities, because they are going to make a difference in our futures.
Okay, so before we take a few questions, I do want to just thank a few folks. I know people like Senator Cisco McSorley, Senator Linda Lopez, Representative Gail Chasey. They have been working on this for decades. And also a couple of our city councilors, in particular City Council Pat Davis, has done a lot of these resolutions. So we really want to emphasize the small village it has taken to deal with this backlog, but also what a reflection of coming together, in this case, as one Albuquerque to deal with this, regardless if we're new to the endeavor or if we've been working on it for decades. So with that, we'll take questions. Anyone? Fire away. Yeah.
Partnerships and collaboration, how important is it that everyone's on the same page, and how cool is it to see how far this network and this web spreads, where all these different groups are wanting to be a part of this effort?
Well, it's absolutely critical because of the different ways that obviously this affects our community. So there's the individual victim, but then there's also the entire criminal justice process that this goes through. There's a scientific element which we see that's very different than some other crimes sometimes. So collaboration really is critical, and I think in any story of collaboration, you know, sometimes it's like one person really driving it, and then everyone else is kind of being pulled along. In this case, it was actually really the advocates had already been doing all of this. What they needed is really, I think, leaders in the community and public officials to stand with them and support them to actually do the work they'd been trying to do all along.
Can you help us understand, I know you guys said that you're adding 2 positions to your sex crimes unit. It sounded like recently there's been 3 more positions added. Can you help us understand, are any of those sworn detectives dedicated specifically to backlog cases?
We can, and I'll let the deputy chief answer that.
Yes, that is, sorry, and yeah, and Sergeant Wild will be able to go ahead and get into specifics, but yes, there are certain detectives that are specifically dedicated to handling these cases that you just asked. We're extremely excited in that we have the opportunity to announce 2 more positions, like the mayor stated, to go ahead and also assist. And this is a result of the administration and the increased recruiting and the future cadet and lateral graduations that are upcoming, so yes.
So do you know how many detectives are dedicated to the backlog cases?
Is that 5?
We have 2. We have 2 that are dedicated to the cold case backlog, and we have 5 that work the active cases.
Others? Sure.
Come January 1st, when I have new leadership in the Roundhouse, how confident is the city that once that change gets made, you know, there's talks about funding and grants, that the state is going to become, in the new leadership, is going to be a part of this effort as well?
You know, we're very confident. This is an issue I know that has been core to a lot of our governor's beliefs and what our governor-elect's beliefs that she wants to work on. And so we've known, all of us have known her for some time. And so I think this is an easy one. Usually I don't speak for another elected official, but I'm pretty sure our governor-elect is going to be on board for what we want to do. And of course, after years and years of education, I think the legislature has really turned a corner as well. And so, you know, they'll have the usual competing demands on resources and so forth, but this is something that I think they now understand is critical, but also, at least from a backlog perspective, sort of solvable. And so I think that's also just important because it's a way for people to actually say, look, we are going to address an issue head on and demonstrate results. You often can't always do that with huger issues like poverty and things like that. And so that's, I think, added additional clarity when it comes to asking for funding for the backlog. All right. Well, yes. Yeah.
You said that you have a 20% hit rate when you run these tests through CODIS. What's the protocol after you get a hit?
You want to do that one?
I will be more than happy to. Once we actually determine that we did get an identified offender from a CODIS, there's two different types. We have the unknown, which could be case to case, or we have a known offender. At that time, we do a case review. We then identify, make sure we have all the property, the evidence, the witnesses. We actually have a huge support from our civilians, which, as you asked earlier, we have 2 sworn, but we also have 7 sworn or non-sworn people who help us with all of the legwork that we don't have the manpower on sworn capacity to do. So they actually review the case, they pull it up, see if we still have the totality of the evidence that we had. Then we sit down with the group and we look at it, because before we call a victim, we want to have the answers. We don't ever want to be on the phone with a victim and we get asked an answer that we're not prepared for. So we as a team, all of the ACERT teams, members from the district attorney's office, advocates, the lab, because they can explain where the DNA was located, we review it as an entire case. At that time, we determine, do we have enough for a warrant? Can we re-engage the victim? And then we process the case and investigate it further once we all are on the same page.
Do you know how many of the tested kits have led to prosecution?
At this time, we have sent 4 cases to the district attorney's office. We have reviewed 15, and I do believe we're up to about 120 CODIS hits, and we're in the process of reviewing each one. Each one of these cases can take months of review. We have to sit down and go through and make sure we can identify the victims. Victims, of course, don't stay in the same location, have the same email and phone numbers. That's all the legwork that these liaisons are doing for us that we don't have the manpower for the sworn personnel.
When you say that you sent 4 cases to the DA's office, are those cases fully ready for prosecution, or are those sent to the DA's office for their review and for potentially additional investigation on their side?
Those we're hoping with meeting ahead of time that we don't have additional investigations, but we have sent them a completed case for them to review, and it is upon them to decide if they do want the additional investigation at that time. Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay. And last thing, just that I forgot to mention, when there was some good work done actually by CNN on this nationally, I do want to just compliment our department. We were one of the only departments that responded with action with respect to the disposition problem. And so I just want to appreciate APD for that and for everyone for working on that. And also it was great to see our state and our department mentioned in the most positive light in that article, really being singled out for that. So thank you to the department. All right, thank you guys so much. Have a good one.